Hello, you must be here to find out about this fine building. I'm John Jarrold, and my family are the past and present owners of the St James Mill here in Norwich. St James Mill first came to be owned by the Gerald family in 1903. The Gerald family are of Protestant Huguenot origins. The House of Gerald was founded in 1770 by John Jarrold from Woodbridge. He sadly died at the age of 31, but his son, John Jarrold II, moved to Norwich in 1823 and started the printing business in London Street. St James Mill was built on a site originally occupied by the Whitefriars, or Carmelites, a Catholic religious order who first settled in Norwich in 1256. After the dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century, the friars had to leave, and by 1749 there was very little left of the great friary structure. This Georgian image shows the remains of the friary on the left, looking down Cowgate Street. By 1937, the remains of the friary were in a precarious state. If you visit the mill today, you'll see an archway from the friary by the mill's main entrance. It bears a plaque commemorating Lady Eleanor Talbot, who was buried at the friary after joining the Carmelites. Her story links to Edward IV, Richard III, and the Wars of the Roses, and is still being debated by historians today. Let me explain why the mill was built. For many years, the Norwich textile industry was renowned for the quality and colour of its cloth. At the turn of the 19th century, the local industry began to suffer from foreign and domestic competition, and an economic depression in the 1820s hit the Norwich textile industry hard. In 1833, local businessman and mayor, Samuel Bignold, looked for a way to help the struggling textile industry. He threw his support behind a plan to revive it. The Norwich Yarn Company was soon established, with one of the earliest shareholders being Gerald and Sons. St Edmund's Mill was built at Fishergate but could not produce the yarn needed. In 1836, the foundation stone of the new St James Mill was laid by Bignold. In celebration, there was a huge, colourful and noisy procession, with factory workers, directors and shareholders riding on horseback through Norwich. It must have been quite a sight. Unfortunately, the new mills could not help Norwich's failing yarn industry. Bignold and the other directors had been borrowing heavily to keep the company going, but had hidden the truth from the shareholders. I can't imagine my family were very happy when they discovered they'd had the wool pulled over their eyes. Do excuse my pun. Eventually, the yarn company was wound up in 1850 with debts of nearly £40,000. So, with the yarn company spinning yarns about its success and eventually collapsing, new companies took over. Floors were let out to spinners and weavers, and by the 1880s the mill was providing employment for around 800 workers, so some good had come from its construction after all. In 1893, my ancestors William and Herbert Jarrold soon saw an opportunity to expand their printing works, putting down a deposit to use buildings adjacent to the mill. A few years later, in 1905, the Norwich chocolate maker Cayley's started paying rent to the Geralds to use part of the mill to produce boxes and Christmas crackers. After the chocolate company left the mill in 1920, it was sold to the government to be used as a government instructional factory for men who had been disabled during the First World War. This interested William Jarrold, who appealed for old vehicles for the men to repair. The government sold the mill back to our family in 1927. Now we enter into a section of our story which is close to my own heart, our printing and publishing business. Gerald had already achieved fame as the printer and publisher of the first edition of Black Beauty in 1878, one of the greatest children's stories. I took a great interest in developing faster, brighter, more accurate printing methods. Our business flourished on this site, and by 1939 we were printing 2 million books a year. It was said in the period of the Second World War, probably every man in the British forces and most American airmen carried at least one piece of Gerald printing. In that period, we used the mill mainly for storage. In June 1942, Fire from an incendiary bomb was skillfully put out by staff, pumping the water from the river. From 1945, I was to oversee a period of expansion and investment, and by 1957, we employed 2,000 people in the printing department, and the mill was our head office. The publishing and printing business was a lifelong passion of mine. I searched for the newest and most exciting technologies, putting Norwich on the printing map of Britain. Alas, due to global competition, we withdrew from printing on this site in 2005. Today, St James's Mill is yet again a centre of innovation and regeneration, with the development of a new business quarter. The John Jarrold Printing Museum in the Old Engineers Department provides the opportunity to step back in time and wonder at the early beginnings of mechanical printing and lithographic techniques, which I praised so highly. The passion and excitement I conveyed to my workers is today continued by the museum staff, who love to share the rich history of the mill with all who will listen.